We all go through life accepting what textbooks told us about the universe. But what happens when questions are raised about many of our fundamental beliefs? A mystery that cannot be explained. An enigma that defies reason. A surprising and unexpected answer. To encounter such a mystery firsthand may change your life forever. Face to face with the greatest riddles of the ages, the world's most profound mysteries reach out and touch your life in ways you've never imagined possible. Encounters with the Unexplained.
We are about to embark on a journey that will help us unravel the many unexplained mysteries still surrounding the ancient story of Noah and the great flood that covered the earth.
Does the leader of this small band of men actually know where to find Noah's Ark? Has the most famous ship in the history of the world been discovered at last? Did an American jet fighter plane photograph a man-made object high atop Mount Ararat in 1959? Have explorers actually recovered artifacts from the Ark, including a body wrapped in resin? Are there eyewitnesses, photographs, and artifacts that can be relied upon? Could it be that after thousands of years, the biblical story is about to be confirmed? Have explorers, scientists, even villagers truly encountered Noah's Ark?
What new findings have modern technology, from satellite photography to the laboratory, provided the serious investigator? Do we know how Noah built his great boat? And who are the people who say they have actually seen the Ark of Noah? Noah's Ark is probably the best known and most thoroughly debated religious artifact in the world. Ark researchers and scholars have raised any number of serious and controversial questions about the entire episode.
Could thousands of animals actually have been taken aboard an immense boat in order to survive a devastating flood? How can one boat, even an immense one, have sheltered all the species of animals known to us in the world today? How could 8 people have cared for and fed all those animals at sea during that entire year?
Why do we get some reports that people have claimed to have seen the Ark on Mount Ararat, yet dozens of well-financed expeditions have gone up there looking for it and have come back empty-handed? It's either up there or it's not.
Existence of the Ark has long been a subject of great controversy, and scholars have generally found it easy to wave off the ancient accounts with little more than a shrug. But the first modern discovery of evidence that the great boat might actually exist created such excitement that a virtual parade of explorers made their way to Mount Ararat. In the mid-1950s, the mountain finally gave up its first physical clues of the 20th century. It was to be the beginning of a series of modern-day efforts to pinpoint the secret whereabouts of Noah's Ark. A French demolition engineer named Fernand Navarre became interested in the Ark while serving in the military. Navarre began the first of a series of expeditions to Mount Ararat in 1952.
My Kurdish guides had abandoned me at the lower level of the mountain, and so I tried my best to proceed on my own. I was not able to find the Ark exposed, but I did see a massive dark shape frozen under the glacier ice. I knew then I would have to return to discover what it could be.
He returned in July of '55, accompanied by his young son, Raphael. What we see here is actual footage filmed by Fernand Navarre and his son during their expedition.
1955 was a warm year with a great glacial meltback. I know if I had a chance to reach the Ark, it would be now.
It was Raphael who first spotted something. Navarre carefully lowered himself deep into a crevice at the 13,500 foot level.
The wood was easy to see, but was frozen into the ice. Still then, I had no idea how big it was.
What Navarre chopped from the ice was a 5-foot, hand-hewn wooden beam.
I had dreamed of this. Raphael and I were excited like it was Christmas time.
A proud moment and fulfillment of a long-held wish. But was this actually wood from Noah's Ark? It was determined that the type of wood Navarre found does not grow near Mount Ararat. As a matter of fact, there's not a forest within 300 miles of the mountain. Navarre had the wood tested in 3 different laboratories. He was told its age was around 5,000 years, clearly in line with the biblical account of the flood. The scientific test proved beyond question that something very old, something very mysterious, was definitely on Mount Ararat. Much of what we commonly know about the story of Noah is found here in the book of Genesis in the Bible. To summarize, Noah and his family, which consisted of his wife, 3 sons, and their wives, was a righteous family in a world filled with wickedness. The Bible tells us God spoke directly to Noah and told him he was about to destroy every living thing off the face of the earth. Only Noah, his family, and the birds and animals are to be spared. But when scientists have gone digging for facts about the Great Flood, some surprising things turn up.
In all the cultures I've studied, the story of Noah and the flood are practically identical in all different sorts of ancient languages, whether it's Persian, Babylonian, ancient Egyptian, Chinese, Sanskrit. The only thing that changes occasionally is the name of Noah. Not only does it appear in the Christian Bible, but also in the Quran, the Bible of Islam. There it tells the story of Noah, or Nuh in Arabic, who escapes the flood in an ark with his family.
These accounts certainly help support the Noah story, but is there any archaeological evidence to back up the stories?
The flood account is found on Babylonian, Akkadian, and Sumerian cuneiform tablets, which are now found in the British Museum. These date back to about 700 BC, but there are older accounts of the flood found in individual Chinese characters. Now, these Chinese characters really date back a long time. And we find the most ancient forms of Chinese character in bronzeware vessels. These are ceremonial vessels, and the writing is found inscribed inside of the vessels.
Contrary to the critics, there does seem to be historical evidence of both Noah and the flood. 272 mentions, to be exact, in every civilization and culture around the world, including the Aztec and Inca cultures. Are there artifacts dating back to antiquity that have been found on Mount Ararat? How does local legend explain these surprising items? Could these be artifacts from Noah's Ark itself? The search for Noah's Ark for at least the past half-century has centered on this volcanic peak, which borders on Iran and the former Soviet Empire. Mount Ararat rises to nearly 17,000 feet and covers 24 square miles. It is not only imposing, it is dangerous as well.
I've climbed mountains all over the world, but Mount Ararat is, I guess, it's brutal. It's just the worst I've ever climbed. Actually, from the south side, when you look at the mountain, it looks like a nice volcanic cone, but then on the opposite side, there's this incredible canyon called the Ohora Gorge. It's about 1.5 times the height of the Grand Canyon. There are vertical rock walls. I'm convinced they're unclimbable. On top of that, it's covered with an ice cap year-round, and that ice cap is always eroding these volcanic layers and always produces in avalanches. Every afternoon there's a storm up on the mountain, and the winds sometimes are over 100 miles an hour.
But neither the ominous legends nor the lethal hazards of the climb have ever deterred the thousands of determined seekers of the Ark.
We know that the Chaldean high priest and historian Berosus visited the site about 475 BC, where he wrote considerably of the phenomena he witnessed, stating that it was quite easy to discern the Ark in its resting place high up on the glacier.
Many celebrated men of antiquity made journeys to the awesome mountain. One of these was Iphanaeus, bishop of Salamis in 360 AD. He was shown an already treasured relic of the Ark, a well-preserved, identifiable piece of a seagoing vessel. The Armenian historian Hippa wrote that he himself saw the Ark in 1254. He wrote, "At the summit of Mount Ararat, a great black object is visible, the Ark of Noah." In 1269 AD, renowned explorer Marco Polo wrote in his book, The Travels, that Noah's Ark rests high in the snowy reaches of Mount Ararat.
There is plenty of ancient historical evidence spanning nearly 2,000 years that the Ark is on Mount Ararat. These sightings, recorded by prominent historians of the time, along with eyewitness accounts, add significant credibility to the survival of the Ark on Mount Ararat.
By the mid-19th century, global communication helped to bring more information to Western civilization, along with, of course, more speculation and rumors of reported sightings. In 1829, a Russian-born German physician named Friedrich Perret became the first Western explorer on record to scale Mount Ararat. Prior to the climb, Perret visited a cathedral in Soviet Armenia. There he was shown a cross, which it was claimed was carved from wood brought down from Noah's Ark in 318 AD. Perret wrote that the carving measured 12 inches high and 9 inches across and was brownish in color. From there, Perret climbed to the 7,000-foot level to the village of Ahora. This is where the St. Jacob Monastery was located. There he saw ancient manuscripts and relics from the Ark. Perret continued on to the summit of Mount Ararat, but he had no success in locating the Ark. In June of 1840, 11 years after Perret's expedition, a tremendous earthquake struck Mount Ararat. The monastery and most of the 2,000 homes and villages in the area were destroyed. Survivors were few. The monastery and the relics it held literally disappeared under tons of ice and rock from the shattered mountain. What remained was a huge gash in the mountain, deeper than the Grand Canyon, now known as the Ahora Gorge. Throughout the 1800s, explorers and adventurers mounted expeditions to seek out the Ark. Truman von Ottisch and an Englishman, Major Robert Pruitt, climbed to the Ararat summit in 1845. Colonel Kotskill of the Russian Army conquered the peak in 1850. There are those critics who have difficulty believing the accounts of past explorers, principally it seems, because the stories are old. And in all fairness, we should ask, is there any reason to believe the record of their explorations?
I have studied virtually every known historical sighting of the Ark on Mount Ararat. In the last 150 years, some of them have gone into considerable detail. I've compared about 32 of these sightings, and I found that there is a tremendous consistency. We can choose to believe that all of these reports are based upon lies, or we can choose to believe that the Ark or some large wooden barge is on Mount Ararat.
But whether Noah's Ark is actually on Mount Ararat is only one of the points of controversy. With the completion of the great boat, God instructed Noah to bring onto the Ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female. But wouldn't the gathering of the animals have been a virtually impossible task?
The Bible says the animals shall come to the Ark. In this case, we wonder how the animals knew to come to this location. We think that instinctively they sensed from what was going on around about them that this impending disaster was about to happen. and as a result, they were led or even driven to seek a place of safety. Hence, the animals came to the ark.
The enormous size of Noah's Ark notwithstanding, many serious questions arise that clearly challenge the credibility of the entire Ark story.
The question I would ask is quite simple. How could 2 of every living animal be brought aboard any vessel? The sheer numbers and weight would overwhelm a fleet of arks. I don't believe we can take the story of the ark literally.
Actually, the biblical record does not say that every species of animal in the world was in the ark. Many kinds were in the ocean, whales and marine creatures of various types, and of course, the major insect varieties in the world were not included either. From studies that I and others have done, we estimate there could have been from 2,500 to 20,000 different kinds of animals taken aboard Noah's Ark.
Each family of creatures on the earth today has a single pair of ancestors. For example, even though there are over 300 varieties of dogs in the world today due to selective breeding, they have a single common ancestor. Considering the number of kinds of animals required to be put aboard the ark, there would have been ample room to load the ancestors of all the species we know today, with room left over for Noah's family, food, and supplies.
In spite of all the ancient accounts and reported sightings, many people over the years have regarded the Ark story as nothing more than an old legend. Part of the problem was that there was only one widely known source, the Holy Bible. But the credibility of the biblical story of Noah got a big boost from an unlikely source, and in a most accidental fashion, from this man. In the mid-1800s, George Smith, an engraver by trade, liked to spend his lunch hours in the British Museum.
I was not a trained archaeologist, but I had an endless fascination for things of an historical nature. My special interest was with artifacts of ancient Assyria. Though I'd never been to that part of the world, I'd read extensively everything available on Middle Eastern cultures and was utterly captivated by the subject.
A frequent visitor, Smith had struck up a friendship with the museum director, who was impressed by the man's intelligence and enthusiasm. Smith was offered a special job. Someone was needed to piece together some of the 25,000 clay cuneiform tablets unearthed at the city of Nineveh and dating back to the 6th century BC.
The next 10 years of my life were spent putting together these ancient clay tablets, but it was more than a complicated jigsaw puzzle. The inscriptions I translated from those tablets had a profound effect on the world of archaeology.
In 1872, after a decade of work, Smith came upon an account of a ship surviving a great flood and its coming to rest on a mountain, a dove being sent out and not finding a place to land. The story told on these tablets, known as the Gilgamesh epic, paralleled exactly the story of Noah in the Bible, suggesting the biblical account is far more than a fictional legend. Smith's startling findings stirred great scientific curiosity and rekindled enormous public interest about the Ark and its possible discovery. And with that renewed interest came another flood, a flood of questions. What about the Ark itself? Was it capable of carrying out its assigned life-saving task? Could a seagoing vessel built to the Ark's specifications endure a 40-day-long cloudburst and survive in a violent storm-tossed sea? Would the Ark be sound and stable in the water? It is admittedly difficult to imagine a huge 3-story wooden barge-like craft surviving at least 40 days and nights of storm-racked seas, especially a craft that had never been close to water before the fateful deluge.
When it comes to the design and construction of the biblical Ark, there are several important reasons it could not have existed. First, the technology needed simply did not exist. Second, any modern vessel today would have certainly foundered in far less weather conditions than the biblical deluge. It is highly unlikely Noah's wooden ark would have survived more than a few hours under such conditions.
To examine this issue ourselves, we took a model of the Ark to a marine laboratory to see how it would handle waves and other hydraulic stresses. When subjected to the waves generally found on the ocean, the Ark was deemed not only seaworthy, but exceptionally stable. Then the test tank duplicated waves equivalent to 200-foot tidal waves. Again, the Ark was not only seaworthy, but extraordinarily safe.
The balance between the buoyant force and the gravitational force and the wave force and so on would be such that the Ark would right itself if it were tilted anywhere up to 90 degrees, anywhere from 0 to 90 degrees, in other words. The righting effect would be such that it would just come right back up again. It'd be practically impossible to capsize.
The Ark, it seems, had some remarkably seaworthy characteristics. It was remarkable for another reason as well. No larger ship was built for over 4,000 years.
It was 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Its roof could hold 20 volleyball courts. It had 1,500,000 cubic feet of space inside, which is the equivalent of 170 railroad boxcars. The Ark should be thought of in this perspective. Think of a 4-story apartment building almost a block long, and you've got it.
But aside from the measurements given in the Bible, how do we know what the Ark really looked like? In 1902, George Agopian, an 8-year-old Armenian boy, became the youngest Ark eyewitness on record. This was a summer of particularly warm weather, leaving the Ark both visible and easily accessible to the young boy and his uncle.
It was huge to see, larger even than any building I had ever seen. My uncle was going to lift me on top, but we had to pile up rocks in order to reach it.
Young George was boosted up and was able to reach the roof of the vessel.
Members of my family had told us stories about coming to the Ark, and now here I was, actually standing on it. Nearby, I could see a hole had been cut in the roof, so I went to it and looked inside. It was just too dark in there to see anything at all. There were pieces broken off here and there, but it was still very solid to walk on. Along the side of the raised section in the middle, there were openings like windows, but there was nothing I could see.
Years after the event, Agopian described what he had seen to archaeological illustrator Alfred Lee.
Up here, George Agopian, after a 4-year drought, went up with his uncle and saw the Ark completely exposed. He also noticed along the side here the wood grain, beautifully fitted joints with wooden dowels. He could see the color of the grain. It was not a stone formation. It was definitely a man-made wooden construction.
All these pieces of beams and wooden planking brought down from Mount Ararat over the centuries present us with yet another question. Given its great age and being subject to the whims of nature, what condition would the Ark be in today?
There's been a tremendous earthquake. As you know, this is an earthquake region. And there's been a great crevasse created here, and a big avalanche, and the Ark has split into 2 pieces. And this is what is being seen today.
This points up another mystery. How can the Ark, so easily found by some, simply disappear when others go looking for it?
This photograph, which was taken by the French Spot satellite in August 1986, indicates that Mount Ararat, pictured here, is permanently year-round covered with glacial ice. On Mount Ararat, there are of course seasonal changes in the weather. The chances of seeing the Ark are greatly increased during the warm months of late summer, such as in August or September. However, there are warmer weather cycles occurring every few years which cause increased meltback of the snow-covered summit. It's possible and probably likely that the Ark is only visible or accessible during these infrequent periods of warmer temperatures. An expedition coming to find the Ark could walk directly over the icebound ship and never know that it's there.
The Bible has given us the Ark's dimensions, eyewitness descriptions tell us what it looks like, and modern hydrologists tell us it was completely seaworthy, indeed virtually unsinkable. So, assuming for the moment the Ark is there under the ice, let's turn to the idea of the flood itself. What, if anything, does modern science tell us such a catastrophe might have done or would have done to the planet Earth once the rain stopped falling?
Do you see?
At long last.
Could it be that answers were actually found here by one of the Defense Department's major research and development laboratories?
We can see on our planet 17 very strange features which can now be systematically explained as a result of a cataclysmic global flood whose waters erupted from subterranean chambers with an energy release exceeding the explosion of 10 billion hydrogen bombs. This explanation shows us just how rapidly major mountains formed. It explains the coal and oil deposits, the rapid continental drift, why on the ocean floor there are huge trenches and hundreds of canyons and volcanoes. It explains the formation of the layered strata and most of the fossils, the frozen mammoths, the so-called ice ages, and major land canyons, especially the Grand Canyon. The pre-flood Earth probably had only one very large supercontinent covered with lush vegetation. There were seas and major rivers. The mountains were smaller than today's, but perhaps 9,000 feet high. According to the hydroplate theory, the pre-flood Earth had a lot of subterranean water, about half of what is now in our oceans. This water was contained in interconnected chambers, forming a thin spherical shell about half a mile thick, perhaps 10 miles below the Earth's surface. Increasing pressure in the subterranean water stretched the crust just as a balloon stretches when the pressure inside increases. Failure in the crust began with a microscopic crack which grew in both directions at about 3 miles per second. The crack, following the path of least resistance, encircled the globe in about 2 hours. As the crack raced around the Earth, the overlying rock crust opened up like a rip in a tightly stretched cloth. The subterranean water was under extreme pressure because of the weight of the 10 miles of rock pressing down on it. So the water exploded violently out of the rupture. All along this globe-encircling rupture, fountains of water jetted supersonically almost 20 miles into the atmosphere. The spray from this enormous fountain produced torrential rains, such as the Earth has never experienced before or after. The Bible states that all the fountains of the great deep burst open on one day, and it describes these events about 5,000 years ago, which we can now tie together scientifically. Some of the water jetting high above the cold stratosphere froze into supercooled ice crystals, producing some massive ice dumps, burying, suffocating, and instantly freezing many animals, including the frozen mammoths of Siberia and Alaska. The high-pressure fountains eroded the rock on both sides of the crack, producing huge volumes of sediments that settled out of this muddy water all over the Earth. These sediments trapped and buried plants and animals, forming the fossil record. This erosion widened the rupture, eventually